everybody. Welcome to another Fireside Chat with Meekono and a very, very special guest. Her name is Georgette Dwomoh-Appiah. Georgette is a dynamic figure in the world of fashion communications and cultural advocacy. Her multifaceted career spans roles as a brand strategist, as a digital communications consultant, and as the founder of Rouge Palette, a PR firm specializing in African fashion. Based in Stockholm, Georgette also serves as a communications consultant for the World Bank, focusing on impactful social media campaigns for the Africa region. In addition to her corporate roles, because that's not enough, Georgette is deeply involved in cultural initiatives. She's the project coordinator and communicator for South Nord, an organization dedicated to connecting Afro-diasporic artisans and curators and artists in the Nordics with vibrant art communities across Africa. Her work includes launching the South Nord Residency Program, aimed at fostering artistic exchange and collaboration. Georgette has also moderated significant events like Design Dialogues, which explored the intersection of African and Nordic fashion, highlighting sustainable practices and cultural exchange. So Georgette, I mean, that in alone is like, okay, an amazing resume you have there. And I am inspired by you, by everything that you do. And I don't even know how we can contain everything in this one short fireside chat. I have a feeling we're going to run out of time. But let's just kick off, Georgette, and ask you just to give me a little bit of background, like who are you and where did this journey start?
Okay, that's a loaded question. So usually it's hard for me to describe who I am because my brain moves in so many directions at the same time. But I like to describe myself as an untamed creative. So I'm always up to something. I'm always thinking up something, dreaming up something, trying something. I was born and raised in Ghana. My family still lives in Accra, and then 5 years ago I moved to Sweden to pursue a master's degree in marketing because I have an engineering background and I'd been working in marketing for so long that I figured, okay, it was time to get an actual educational degree in the field of work that I had. And then the story just started to write itself. I worked in fashion before I left Ghana. I worked with one of the best fashion brands in Ghana. And moving here, it was a bit difficult at first, but once I figured out life, the story's just been writing itself along the way.
Okay, and so what role do you think your Ghanaian roots and your experiences in Accra played in shaping your own personal brand, which is a very strong one, as well as your professional direction?
So I'd say the first thing for me is I am very proudly, intentionally African. It's something that I've always been super proud of. I've never felt the need to want to be anything other than Ghanaian. There's just a certain sense of pride that comes with this. Every time someone says, "Oh my God, I've heard of Ghana," I get like super excited. You think the government pays me to do PR for Ghana, right? That's how much I love being Ghanaian. But also growing up, there's a very uniquely Ghanaian and I'd say broadly African thing where you can't afford to fail. Your parents put so much work, they invest so much work in you that you just have to honor them in every way. And it's one of the things that contribute to who I am because every time I do something, I think of how it reflects on my dad and more importantly, how it reflects on my mom because I lost her right after I moved to Sweden. So now it's like, okay, I need to make sure I'm honoring her memory. Wherever she is, she says that's my girl. So that's one of my guiding stars. And then also feeling deeply about the work that I've seen firsthand being done back home and just how much I need the world to recognize what I have seen and the goodness that happens back home. So that kind of fuels me, impact. Like you have to make sure they see this thing in the way that it needs to be seen, just so that people are not labeled as other. So those kind of thoughts are what fuel me, and it just all comes back it all goes back to where I come from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always curious. Did you grow up in urban Ghana, and to what extent was culture sort of intentionally discussed, or to what extent did you participate in, let's say, Ghanaian cultural activities, for example?
Okay, So that's an interesting one because I did grow up in urban Ghana, but then um, we did in our school curriculum there were lots of like different cultural things that we would be taught. But then my mom, for all her fancifulness as a human being, was also deeply cultural because of her background. There was connections. My grandma was queen mother of the village that we came from. So my mom actually went to finishing school, cultural finishing school. And she used to not show that part of her until like she was in a deeply cultural setting. And then suddenly she'd switch and speak a deeper level of the language that we spoke. And I'd be confused, like, wait, who are you again? So we did the most interesting things. Like there's a coming of age ceremony in my culture called Bargo, which we learn about in school. But then I don't know in practicality how many people do it. And there's an extensive version of it that, it's a whole spiel. I won't get into it. But I remember when I was coming of age, we did a fraction of it at home where my mom gave me like a full egg boiled, and I had to eat it without biting into it because it symbolized fertility, right? Which is it's a tradition that happens. So all these little nuggets were things that were like taught me in the most subtle ways without like sort of choking me with it. So it's always been in the back of my head, like just be intentional about not losing where you're from. These are the things that we do. Yes, we are modern and everything, but you have to make sure that because then you would have to pass it on as well. And that's how you never lose your way back home. So
I did so cultural finishing school, all those things. These are things that I think don't come out into the light very, very often. I've heard about it from my travels in Kenya. I'm from Malawi, and we also have that, but it feels like it's a dying tradition. But it's always lovely to my interest actually is in seeing how people from a more westernized parts of Africa, how they relate to the deeply cultural practices, and how that then also feeds into when they go out into Western settings, how they actually push those forward. And my hope is always that it's not something they push down, but rather promote, and say, well, we've got relevance here in these spaces.
I hope so too, to be fair. And I hope that one day when I'm a mother, I'm able to teach my children all the things that I learned from my family, because I would really hate for some of these things to get lost, because then suddenly they're 18 and then they don't necessarily know their culture.
Yeah.
And I've encountered people who are my age now who didn't grow up, back home, and now they're trying to figure out what their culture really is.
Yeah.
So seeing that, I want to do my best to make sure that the things that I know and the things that I remember, I'm able to pass on.
Yeah.
Because it's easy for it to get lost.
It is very easy. It's like it's implied. Maybe it's something you know, but you don't openly talk about, and then that's it. It's lost. It's lost.
Yeah.
And I think it feeds into my next question, which is, you often talk about creating your own seat at the table. As opposed to trying to find one for you. There's hardly ever a spare seat at the table. Table is a very in-demand thing.
It is.
So you talk about creating your own seat at the various tables that we find ourselves faced with in life. What advice do you have for other African creatives trying to do the same, especially in unfamiliar or maybe even hostile or unsupportive spaces?
Okay. So I think the first thing is figuring out what table it is that you're trying to sit at and why you want to sit at that table. Because sometimes you get caught in the fancifulness of, oh, I want to be this and I want to do that. But then what's your why? That's a question I ask myself all the time. Every single thing that I want to do, I attempt to do, I have to ask myself, what's the reason why I want to do this? And why do I feel like I deserve to be the one to do it? And I think that's the first step for when you're thinking of building your own seat, your own table, even, or creating your own seat at the table. First, you have to ask yourself, what's the why? And then you have to look at it through the lens of the other people who sit at the table.
Yeah.
What about you makes you uniquely poised to be called onto this table, or for them to shift and say, actually, this person needs to be here, because I quickly learned that being talented is not the only thing that you need. You need to be able to understand context, nuance. You need to see how your skill set fits in the environment that you find yourself in. And you also need to find your people, because it can be very isolating when you have all these dreams and you're incredibly passionate and you want someone to give you the opportunity, but you can't find anyone to give you the opportunity. So you have to actively search for your own community, build your own community ground up if you have to, and never stop talking about and believing in whatever it is that you're passionate. There's a reason why. There's a reason why. So figure out what the why is, and then build upon that. And always remember that, okay, I have a question to ask everyone. This opportunity that you want, if you were on the other end of it, and if you had to hire you, or if you had to give you the opportunity, would you give you the opportunity? If you wouldn't give you the opportunity, then clearly you're not prepping well enough.
Yeah.
So that's how I typically look at it. That's the advice that I would give.
Yeah, I remember. So this is, Meekono is the second business that I've started. Prior to this, I had another business that was more leaning towards the fashion end of the creative sector. And I remember the longest time saying if I was an investor, because prior to this, I came from an investor and a banking and finance background. And I would ask myself, would I invest in my business right now? And it's a fair question to ask. It's not critical. Like, don't get defensive.
Exactly.
Would I invest my business? And my answer actually was no. And it was valid. And I had to ask myself, since the answer is no, what is it about this business that would stop me as an investor wearing that hat from investing? And it wasn't that it was like game over. I can't do this, therefore game over. It is, these are the gaps that I need to fill in order to get an investor. So I think relating that to what you're saying, it's the same thing of, would I hire me, or would I wear my clothes?
Yes.
Or would I?
Yeah, exactly.
Would I? And it's not just me, myself, but it is my target customer. And the answer might lead you to a different target customer, or it might lead you to rethinking what I'm making, rethinking my storytelling. It might lead to various things, but it is a very, very useful and necessary exercise to do periodically, not just once.
Exactly, like all the time.
You kind of touched on the fact that you worked for this amazing fashion brand in Ghana, a brand I admire so much. And I actually was fortunate to meet the founder, the creative director, in about 18 months ago. And I just I loved it. I loved it.
It's amazing.
She is absolutely amazing. Don't know if you want to talk about that, but I think it's worth.
I'm not opposed to it if you have any questions.
Oh, great. Okay. Fantastic. Because I think this is one of the most successful brands to come out of, luxury brands to come out of Africa. And so my question to you is, how can creatives, artisans, craft collectives better position their products within the high-end, high-value / luxury space without compromising their authenticity and their, I guess, cultural inspiration?
Okay. So with this one, I'd say it requires a lot more intentionality than you think, and just piggybacking off what we said before about would you buy from you? Would you hire you? Would you invest in you? Right? One of the things that I learned and came to deeply appreciate was the culture of quality control. No seam can be out of place. If you want to compete on the global luxury scale, you have to be sure that no seam is out of place. You have to be sure about your fabric. So you have to be intentional about your fabric selection. You have to be intentional about the way your images come out, because you're telling a story. You're not just selling products. You're telling a story. You're selling your dream. You're selling an idea to people. And it's a whole journey which does not necessarily begin with the clothes, but it will end with when the clothes finally reaches your customer. So you have to think about it holistically. And you can be an artist and have great talent, great designs and everything, but if the product is not matching the customer experience, or even if you have a great customer experience, or you have a great product, but you have a wishy-washy customer experience, your customer service is not good, or just the overall branding is a bit touch and go, it affects the way people perceive you. So it's thinking holistically about it and also keeping an eye on what people in your industry are doing and what the standards they're setting are, and then striving to meet those standards in a way that's unique to where you come from, what your product is in your situation, but which also guarantees that if someone discovered you, because people will discover you, the internet is huge. Someone somewhere will discover you, but when people discover you and they start to talk about you, it should feel comparable to all these global players that you're trying to reach. That's the level you should be at. That's the level of intentionality that you should have across all touch points of your brand.
And by touch points, well, putting on my finance hat as well, I'm something that a drum I beat very often, which is I think there needs to also be a match between your price and the product.
Yes. Yes. Yes, for sure.
I'm not saying, but literally the number of times when, there is also that mismatch. And that includes like if people have no idea, it's there. As you said, the internet is a very big place. You can always ask the question of the internet. What brands are within my price point? What are the similar comparable brands? Because guess what? Your target buyer is also asking that same question to say,
exactly.
Will I be putting a product in my shop that people won't touch because they also know about another brand where price is the same, the look is the same, but I get a better experience. The story is better. And speaking of stories, what do you think are, and in line with what you're saying, what do you think are like 2 or 3 key elements of effective storytelling? Because that's a very important part of this whole packaging that we do of brands. What are 2 or 3 elements of very effective storytelling that African creative brands often overlook? Not the ones they do well, but the ones that they often overlook.
One of the things that they miss is, in my opinion, is who are you talking to, first of all? Because a lot of people shoot editorials, shoot ads, and sometimes you have to pause to wonder, are you doing it for just the reactions on social, or you actually had your customer in mind when you're doing it? Because you need to understand
what's the difference?
The person who's liking your post is not necessarily always your customer. There are people who will actively shop from you but have no idea what you're doing on socials or really don't care, because their lives are too busy. Occasionally they'll go and scroll, oh, that's a pretty picture, but then they don't really get into the meat of it. And then it's social media. There's so many people who are engaging with your posts for different reasons. There's the person who's looking for creative inspiration. There's a person who's trying to inspire herself of where she's trying to reach in the future.
Yeah.
There's somebody who's just doom scrolling. There's whoever is engaging with your content, you can't assume is your customer.
Yeah.
So then in the storytelling, you need to identify who you're trying to reach with the storytelling, and then how. And I had this conversation with a creative friend the other day where we're talking about how there needs to be more expansive range in the storytelling, right? Yes, the editorial pictures are great. And yes, the campaign videos that have highly polished angle shots are great across the board. Yeah. But then I saw, I can't remember, I think maybe it was for Can Leon. I could be wrong, but there's a Ghanaian dancer, and there was a collaboration between her and a Ghanaian videographer, photographer, to tell the story of what led her into dance. But then in telling her story, it was a video campaign. In telling the story, they pulled lots of different clothes from different Ghanaian brands, right? So you had socks from a Ghanaian brand, you had the actual clothes from a Ghanaian brand, and it was shot in a sporty way. Where she was talking about dance, she was dancing, all of that. And it was almost like a docu ad. And when I watched it, my first thought was, oh my God, imagine if this was just a campaign video for someone's collection. This would be phenomenal, right? Because suddenly people are learning someone's story, but then also you're like, wait, but those shorts are nice. Where did she get it from? Oh, wait, it's made in Africa? So now you've caused such a broad range of emotions and feelings and thought processes, which suddenly starts to break beyond just the average social media person into markets that you hadn't even considered. So those are some of the things that I think are missing. Who are you actually talking to?
Right.
And what's the emotional connection that you're making? I think those two things could help with the storytelling quite a lot.
Okay. Now, moving outside the topic of storytelling into a broader conversation about branding, what do you think are the common mistakes, the common branding mistakes that African creative brands make? Not when appealing to their local audience, because I feel like they, from what I've seen, people are quite good at that. But if they want to break into a more international setting, what common branding mistakes do you see them making when it comes to appealing and crossing over to international appeal?
One of the biggest things is photography. It's one of the major things. Is photography. It's how the images are shot, how they're edited, where they're shot. So you find that the brands that have more of an appeal are those who are intentional with their imagery, because then the first thing people want to see is, and this is insights that I garner from having my pop up in Stockholm. Every time people come and they see the clothes, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Then they say, okay, can I see the Instagram? And they go to the Instagram and you can almost tell like their reaction, because they're looking at the clothes and they're loving the clothes, but then it's not necessarily translating into how the socials are looking, right?
Yeah.
Or they move from socials to website and the website is not translating in a certain way. And yes, there's certain things that you do that operating in a local market could work. Yeah. But then if you're trying to break into a more international market, the standards that they are used to, that they will engage with, that you can't fault them for neglecting your brand because then you don't meet a certain standard. It's a very unconscious bias, right? And that ends up being one of the things that I really hope to be able to break with running this initiative that's the pop-up, where I'm gaining by putting these brands in front of the kind of people that they're trying to reach. We're trying to collect the insights that they need, that they can polish up. You keep saying you're designing for this person, or you're producing, you're trying to reach this person. Yeah. But then the clothes they may buy, but then how do they find the clothes without a pop-up happening somewhere in Europe, somewhere in Asia, somewhere in North America for them to discover you? Because if they go to your socials or your website and they're not captivated by it, so it's I'd say one of the biggest mistakes, the photography, the quality of the photos, right? And the world of photography, especially in the context of fashion, is so broad now. COVID taught us that you don't necessarily always need a studio.
And the photography, yeah, absolutely, I get it.
You can use your iPhone. Yes. You just need your iPhone. You need good sunlight, which we are blessed with. You need a great background.
Thank you. And just a plug. We do have a masterclass called Smartphone and Photography Masterclass, using your smartphone and the sunlight. Because goodness, the smartphone is, the smartphones have moved on quite a lot in terms of their ability to take great pictures. Exactly. They do amazing. And Pinterest is your best friend. Pinterest is my best friend. Yeah, that's why I do my doom scrolling. That's why I do my doom scrolling. I'm always like, I like that picture, that angle, that light. Like, just always going through it. And it will get better, but you have to be intentional and consistent about what the images look like. And then also what photography falls under the visual identity, but then I'm going to say coming down to things like logos and brand fonts and maintaining that kind of consistency. Does your logo stand out? Is it something that we'll remember? Yeah. Is your branding consistent across the board, or you're using 6 different fonts on rotation? Like every time I open your page, it's a new font. So I can't identify a specific look and feel for your brand. All these things matter. They look like they don't, but they matter. And the resources, I understand that not every brand is in the place that they can invest in a professional to create some of these things for them. But then there are all sorts of resources. Canva is one of the best things that could happen to small brands, because Canva has its own university where they teach you the design principles. So if you commit time to actually learning, you'll learn
the little things that you can use to create the assets that you need.
Mm.
Canva is also integrated with AI, so type in a prompt and let it generate a set of assets for you, and then just use that on rotation. Right now there's no excuse.
You're
The
right.
only excuse here is that you're not trying. You can't be bothered. You're more interested in designing the clothes because there's really no excuse.
Because I didn't know is no longer an excuse. Literally, I didn't know it's not an excuse. Because even outside, going outside the, let's say, ChatGPT or whatever other AI, even Google these days, what can I do to improve my brand? Pinterest is free. Okay. Canva, there's a free version of Canva. So, and then Instagram is free. Places where you can look at what the best in your sector, in your space are doing, because they've probably got, they're paying tens of thousands of, dollars or whatever for a team putting together a story. Why waste a good amount of money spent? Why not go and get your inspiration from there as well? I think when I was starting out, because I moved from a non-creative space into a creative space, and I said, I'm not going to look at what my peers are doing. I'm going to look at what the best in the sector are doing in terms of photography. Service is free as well.
Yeah.
So what can I do to emulate that? And as you said, that's a jumping off point. You emulate, then you find your own voice through practice.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway.
And then also one more thing. I was going to say, don't underestimate the value of the network you have around you.
Okay.
This may not necessarily be in the creative industries, but sometimes people have ideas because they are the audience, they are the people using social media. So if you have an idea, run it by your friends, run it by your family, run it by your creative community, ask questions. It can be a bit daunting when you think of the fact that, there's all this pressure on me. I'm the one, people have expectations, but then sometimes use the people around you. Don't undervalue what they're capable of just because they may not necessarily be in the industry that you're in, is what I would say as well.
So true. I think advice I received early that I held on to was always tell the story. You never know who the person you're speaking to is connected to. Right. And the surprises I've had from having conversations with people, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, my cousin does this. And you're thinking, oh my goodness. And they'll introduce you. And another one was, it's an acronym for me, SSP, shameless self-promotion. Shameless.
100%.
Like, let us get rid of this humility business. Let's get rid of this fear that people are going to copy me. If I tell too many people about what I do, they might copy, they'll execute differently. If the idea is your original idea, they cannot be in your brain. So people will shamelessly copy you, but you need to shamelessly promote yourself just in case that person is your next ambassador, your next customer. Your next investor, even. Moving on to your experience, you've lived in Sweden now for 5 years. We all, when I think about Sweden, I think of it being synonymous with sustainability and environmental consciousness. I think about Greta Thunberg as well. And so you've curated 10 African designers whose ethos aligns with Swedish sustainability and sort of environmental responsibility values. How do you navigate the cultural translation between the vibrancy of African fashion and the Swedish aesthetic, the Scandinavian aesthetic, minimalism? I've heard of, is it Afriscandi? Something like that. Anyway, whatever the case, how have you been able to navigate that cross-cultural, those differences? I think because the answer will be an inspiration for all of us who are trying to get a foothold in the global space. So what are your lessons from that?
So it's an ongoing lesson. I'm still learning every day. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've hacked the system because I haven't. I'm still learning. But the first thing I have done or I did when I moved here was just observing people. I'm a bit of a people watcher. It's how I get inspired for so many things, marketing, PR, like lots of things. I just observe people, the way they behave. So I started paying attention to clothes because I like the clothes. And one of the things that I do for myself every day is I try to wear at least one thing that's made in Africa. It could be anything. So my earrings are made in Ghana. My that's from Ghana, that's from Morocco, that's from Ghana. I try to every day. And they're almost always things that intentionally or unintentionally start a conversation. Because the minute you say, "Oh, I like your earrings," I will just give you a whole spiel about African fashion, shamelessly self-promoting, you know? So what I realized is the more I observed them, the more I started to understand their style. So then it also started to change in little ways the way that I dress. So even though I still incorporate these things every day, I started to incorporate them in a more Scandi way. So today I'm wearing a denim skirt, for instance, which is made in Ghana, but I paired it with like a regular striped shirt. So it looks muted, but it's still very African.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things has been finding ways to fuse both wardrobes in a way that stands out, but that's not overwhelming. And now, as the pop up grows, as we have season after season, starting to teach people the ways that they can put it in their closet. Because what we realize is that when they see all the clothes at a go, it gets overwhelming. It's too much color, too many things, like so many shapes. Oh my God, oh my God. Like it's pretty, but I don't know how I'm going to wear that. But the way you start to pick them apart and you say, okay, this jacket, your black slacks and white t-shirt, just throw it up. But they're like, oh, that's amazing. I'm like, yeah, so you have to give it to them in doses. And that's the trick that I learned like in the past year where I was like, okay, maybe if I start to like do styling videos. So the last part, that's what we did. We did styling videos where we showed people how to wear the clothes in a more Scandinavian context, right? We worked with a stylist who has predominantly Swedish customers who invited all of them in and then styled the clothes for them in their context. And it was very successful. They were all like, oh, I didn't know. Okay, can I have those pants? Can I have that skirt? You know, so it's breaking it down to them in a way that they understand. Because if we dress it up in a way that we dress, it is very pretty to look at, but now you're a peacock in a very uniform. Yeah, it's like a very ambient and uniform society. So you have to find a way to maybe not be a peacock, but what bird could I use? Maybe a magpie. You know, iridescent feathers, but you're still black. You know, just find a way to blend in but stand out. That's the thing that I have learned. Yeah,
that is so true. When I opened a boutique at some point in my journey, and that was such an education for me because there I was bringing products that are, you know, we love color because the weather and our culture, they're vibrant. You know, they're very loud and I had women come and say to me, she said, this lady was telling me, when I'm saying to you, does my bum look big in this? I need my clothes to say no. Whereas I know in your culture, does my bum look big?
My clothes to say yes.
The clothing must affirm.
It must look big.
And it's stuff that I just took for granted. And from that point on, my message because we worked with, you know, over 100 different brands, and my message was, understand who you're designing for. But that whole thing about fusing, the thing about fusion is then maybe rather than a dress, if it's colorful. And I had the conversation with an Irish lady just recently, and she said, oh, the color is a bit bright. And I said, you could actually wear a white shirt and make it into pants. Make it into make the fabric, because she was just talking about a fabric. And I said, if you wear pants below your waistline, and then it doesn't invade you.
It doesn't stand out so much. Yeah.
So much. And so she was going away with that. So that makes a lot of sense. Like, how are we still maintaining the brand look, the feel, and everything, but designing products that will make people more comfortable, even as entry-level products, like entry, and then they get to know the brand more.
Exactly.
Telling, and they then become.
A trick we had this year was to get everything in a black or blue or brown as well. And I'll tell you this, there's a brand that beautiful, beautiful, vibrant clothes. if I was shopping for them, I will buy the colorful stuff. But I said, okay, can I have this specific piece in black? You know what sold out first from that brand? The black items.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I love this, but I don't know if I can wear the color every day. And I was like, oh, but I have it in black. And they were like, yes.
Ah, amazing.
It was instant. Black pieces just sold,
So
So that's
were these black pieces which had any print? What was it about them?
it was a mosaic. So these clothes were made from organza, and it's an organza mosaic of, let's say, purple, pink, and blue, or green, pink, and yellow. And there was a black, beige, and gray, which is Holmes color palette, black, beige, and gray. So the minute they saw it, they were like, yes, because I can wear this every day without feeling like I'm overdoing it.
Right. So just to play devil's advocate, are you saying that African brands must not use African textiles because they tend to be colorful? Is that what you're saying?
I actually have qualms with what we view as African textiles, because we have African textiles, and then we have wax print from Holland, which people call African print.
Holland and now China.
Exactly. So in recent pop-ups, and this was something that we learned last year, we had a brand that had a lot of wax print clothes, and people gravitated towards them because it fed into a stereotype of what African clothes are, but then they didn't purchase them because they couldn't see themselves wearing it every day. So this year we turned around a lot of wax prints, a lot of brands that have wax print as a foundation, because what we said to them was they gravitate towards it because it's nice to look at, but then they won't buy it. And then secondly, on a personal level, it was starting to feed a stereotype of what African clothes are. There are these clothes made from wax prints and like multicolors, blah, blah, blah. That's not my Africa. At least like the clothes that I wear are not made from that, So then it makes you think, if you're designing for an international audience, keep the color. Don't take the color away. 100% keep the color, but be intentional about the fabric, especially if you're targeting the EU, because the EU has more regulation for fabric. They're building regulation towards these things, the digital product passport, all of that. So eventually you're going to have to start thinking more consciously about the kind of materials that you're producing with. And you can't just default to wax print because it's internationally known marker of what an African product is. Yeah.
Do you have brands that have been successful or in using a traditional Ghanaian fabric like kente cloth? You have?
Yeah.
You see, there you go. There you go. Because I think
kente is expensive.
Kente
That's the thing.
Really expensive.
It's a very expensive fabric. So then that makes you unintentionally luxury.
Exactly, because you're only using small elements of it. And the same can be said of Nigerian prints like the the handwoven textile, even like the mud cloth. So yes, you're unintentionally luxury because you have to then use other non-print fabrics. Yes.
But if the tailoring is good, you find your audience is what I've come to realize. Great tailoring, intentional branding.
Right. There you go. So a question for me now, specifically for me, for those of us who are building platforms like Meekono, we're building platforms that enable market access, that facilitate, the crossing of cultures, crossing of boundaries for African creative brands that are successful locally but want to broaden them, their reach. How can we better support artisans and creatives beyond just sales? How can we be a place where your brand, can start looking and saying, oh, yes, we want to actually support these creative brands? How can we do that?
I would say active investment in the scaling up of the brands, and it doesn't necessarily have to be financial. So you're working with these brands, you're trying to help them bridge markets, but then because you know the market that they're trying to enter, you know what that market is looking for. So scaling up this brand's back-end processes so that, for instance, they're able to fulfill buyer's requests, because some of these brands produce only small quantities. But then if you're helping them make their production more efficient, maybe they'll be able to produce double that. They need to understand that when eventually a buyer spotlights your brand and says they want to shop from you or want to buy your things in bulk to stock a store, they're not going to buy 100 units. They'll probably want 1,000 units,
Right.
So it's conscientizing them about some of the things that the industry needs beyond the B2C end of it. So B2B conscientization, yes, they're trying to break into new markets, but how do you make sure your brand is prepped across all fronts, or at least ready to partner with someone who can help them or prepare for the moment that they've been waiting for? I think that's one of the things. And also, this is something that came to yesterday. Crisis control. A lot of brands don't know how to deal with crisis control, where maybe you're in a situation where someone is stealing your designs, or somebody has accused you of stealing your designs, or some sort of other, maybe a customer had a bad experience with you and went online and said all kinds of things, and now it's affecting your PR. That sort of training is also important because it helps shape the way the brand is going, the direction, because how they deal with that situation is pivotal to how people see their brand moving forward. So those are sort of things that I would say. Those are sort of things that I would say you could help them. I mean, I have a laundry list of items.
An entire laundry list. I'll be getting that.
I have a laundry list. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people will be interested in the fact that we've got an ally out there in the Scandinavian region. Tell us a little bit about what's next, what you're working on, and any other tickets. Just whisper in our ear.
Secret. What I'm working on next is secret. But so I'm working on taking the art of African fashion into a new city, that and Rouge Palette. So I'm expanding the reach. I'm not going to say where, but we will be moving into a new city soon. So far, we've had 4 pop-ups in Stockholm, 1 pop-up in Accra. We're trying to make the pop-up in Accra like a mainstay and eventually travel across other African countries. But now we're working on taking it into another Western city so that there's 2 nodes for where you can test the market, where you can sell products, where you can discover customers. I won't say where, not just yet, but eventually I'll announce that. We're also working on some back-end support for brands that have been part of the pop-up before, because we realized that there's so many insights that we gather that just sending a sales report or having a post-mortem conversation won't cut it. So we are working on developing a product that gives them support beyond the pop-up for a couple of months. It's in the pipeline. We haven't launched it yet. We hope to launch it later this year so that it's a space that that, okay, anytime I need support with ABCD, I can still reach out to the team. They'll connect me to whoever could, further that support, or they'll help me whatever way that they can.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that I'm working on.
Oh, well, we'll keep an eye on you. And we'll share your socials in a bit. But from all the work that you've done in the past 5 years, tell us some special moments, some moments you hold dear in your work, bringing African creative products and brands into the Scandinavian space.
I'd say 2 very distinct moments. The first one is starting the pop-up in the first place. I was in a horrible space. My socials may not have reflected that, but I was struggling to figure out my place here, to find work, all of that. And I made a friend that I had told that I wanted to, start like a creative gathering and then show me my clothes. And she was like, "Oh, I'm trying to start an exhibition, for Africa Day." And we sort of like chatted about it a bit. And then a day later, she was going to see this wonderful lady that I work with here now. And she asked me to come along. And we went, and this one was like, "Okay, so tell me, what's your story?" And I gave a whole spiel about the work that I used to do in Ghana and the things that I've accomplished and what my dreams are, and the fact that like I'm looking to host this event here, but I don't know where to begin from. And on the spot, she was like, you can use my space for free.
Oh my goodness.
Every time I remember it, I have goosebumps and I want to cry because I'd spent a year and a half applying to jobs, trying to figure things out. And it really took telling one person that I didn't know from Adam what I was trying to do. And then I told her, it's just like, I'll give you space for free. Then I called the founder of this great company that I used to work with in Ghana. And I said, listen, your girl has been fighting for her life, but this is what I'm trying to do, and I have quite a number of clothes from you. So I was thinking I'd show them the clothes and see how they feel about it. And then we could start some dialogue. And she was like, great idea, but if you're going to show my brand, we're going to send you things from the new collection, because she's very protective of her brand, which is, like I said, you have to be intentional about how you want to show up in the world. But she was like, no, babes, we'll send you clothes. Right. And then she was like, and speak to this other person and tell her what you're trying to do and see if she'll be willing to support. So I went from shamelessly self-promoting. I'm going to be saying this for the rest of the week, by the way. I went from
You're welcome.
Thank you. I went from shamelessly self-promoting to having a space and 13 brands in the span of 1 week.
Oh my goodness.
And then a friend who lives in Ghana but had an EU passport said that the logistics of this is insane. If you buy my plane ticket, I'll fly to you with the clothes.
Oh.
And then all these clothes that I got, what they said to me was, well, we know you're thinking of doing an exhibition, but if you could try to sell, then you can keep a percentage of the sales. So I kid you not when I say all this happened in the span of 3 weeks. Space, clothes, try to sell the clothes, friend bringing the clothes over. And I was a broke student in Stockholm. So it just, and then I tweeted it, and then somebody reached out to me and said, oh, hey, I live in Stockholm. Do you want to get coffee? And usually I'm just a bit skeptical, but I was like, what could it hurt, Yeah. And then I spoke to this person. They're like, well, I don't work in the industry. I have no clue of what goes on, but I have a friend who does. So here's her name. Text her and see how she can help. I texted her. Till this day, I still haven't met this person. But what she did was she was like, oh, I know a guy you should talk to. Gave me this guy's number. Turns out he is a prominent figure in the fashion industry here. He's one of the Africans who've made it big here. And he was like, oh, here is a guest list of 50 people across the industry in this country, in this city that might be interested. He didn't know me from anywhere. Gave me a bunch of emails.
Oh my.
And I tell him, I don't meet him very often. And I met him in person for the first time 2 years after the very first pop-up. But what I said to him when I met him was, you have no idea how that little act of kindness changed my life. And every time I meet him, I tell him, like, you don't know, but you're one of my, you're one of my guidance stars in this city. What you did for me, I will never forget. So that entire journey to the first pop-up is one of the most special things to happen to my journey in Stockholm. And then the second thing is, fast forward 3 to 4 years later, this year's pop-up, and opening it with a preview dinner for the 10 people that had stayed faithful and either shopped all through the pop-up or had opened doors and given opportunities leading up to, or had just discovered it and had become like avid fans. I threw a dinner for them, and just seeing all of them in that room filled me with so much joy, because it made me realize that over the time, each of these people have become part of my actual community of friends and family in this city. So it was a full circle moment for me, that at the point where I met each of you, I didn't know that we're going to get to this point, but it's been impactful and it's awe-inspiring. And it took everything in me not to cry that day. So when I really think of my journey, those are the two things that get me the most.
That just left me speechless. I was just asking an innocent question. That is an amazing story. I mean, there's so many things to pick up from that. It's how you having the intention, the seed, you planted the seed ultimately, and you've enabled this thing to happen. And it took, it's take you out of the equation. I know that you're giving credit to all of these people, but you planting that seed has brought all these various people together. And here you are just promoting African creativity in a dignified and unapologetic and high quality way. You're doing a great service. And I think that what you're doing is actually opening doors for people you may never meet, brands that may not be part of your stable, but who will, because you have created a space for them, will have more success. They will be more seamlessly sort of accepted into the Scandinavian community and wherever else you're going. So all I can say, thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for your generosity in speaking to me today as well. And I can't wait to share this fireside chat with our own community. And I'm really, really looking forward to meeting you in person at some point and working together with you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I typically don't speak on my journey much. I'm just a happy-go-lucky girl posting my Instagram stories and getting on with life. So this has been good. Thank you so much, Daphne. And yes, I do look forward to meeting. Maybe we'll, cross paths somewhere on the continent soon.
Yes. And please, as a last thing, please share your socials before I say goodbye.
Okay, so my business pages are at Rouge Palette and at Art of African Fashion on Instagram, on TikTok. And my personal page is Georgette, but I forget how to, there's a dot and an underscore somewhere. I think it's GEORG.ETTE underscore, I think. Okay. But it's a profile picture of the black girl, white hair. If you see that, that is me.
Black girl, white hair. We're going to Google you. We'll find you. We will find you. Thank you so much for your time, Georgette.
Thank you so much, Daphne.